Yn was walking back to her dorm when she noticed Miyoen leaning casually against the wall by the entrance. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes were anything but. There was a cold, calculating edge to her that made Yn's skin crawl. Miyoen's gaze locked onto hers, and a faint, almost mocking smile tugged at her lips. Miyoen's voice rang out, clear and composed, though there was an undertone of something more sinister. Can we talk for a minute? Yn's stomach twisted uneasily. She had never been the type to shy away from confrontation, but there was something about Miyoen's tone and presence that set her on edge. Still, she nodded. What is it? Miyoen tilted her head, giving her that fake, sweet smile that never quite reached her eyes. I know you think you've got everything figured out with Jungkook, but there's something you really need to know. Yn's chest tightened. She had no idea where this was going, but her instincts were screaming at her to walk away, to ignore whatever Miyoen was about to say. But Miyoen had already taken a step closer, her voice lowering to a whisper. You think Jungkook loves you, don't you? Miyoen's words were like a slow poison, laced with venom. But I'm sorry to be the one to break it to you. He doesn't. He never did. The only reason he's with you is because of a promise he made to me. Miyoen's eyes gleamed with satisfaction as she spoke. He promised me that he would make things right. That he would propose to you, to keep me from getting hurt. You're nothing but an obligation to him. You're a pawn in a game he doesn't even want to play. Yn felt her heart stop. The world around her seemed to blur as Miyoen's words sank in. She could barely breathe as the weight of what was being said pressed down on her chest. No, Yn whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. That's not true. Jungkook wouldn't, he wouldn't do that. Miyoen's smile grew wider, and her voice became more condescending. You're so naive, Yn. He's only with you because of me. He doesn't want to be with you. You're not the one he loves. You're just a substitute, something to fill the space until I came back. If I hadn't asked him to propose, he would have never done it. You don't even mean anything to him. The words were cutting deeper with every second. Yn could feel the anger rising in her chest, but it was drowned out by the overwhelming pain and confusion. Her knees wobbled, and she had to brace herself against the wall to stay upright. Why are you doing this? Yn asked, her voice trembling. Why are you trying to hurt me like this? Miyoen stepped closer, her eyes cold, devoid of any warmth. Because you deserve to know the truth. The reality you're living in with Jungkook isn't real. It's just a lie, and I'm the one who has the power to end it. He's mine, Yn. He always will be. Miyoen stood there, looking satisfied, watching Yn's every reaction like a hawk. Her words had cut deep, and she was certain Yn was crumbling beneath the weight of the truth she had so callously delivered. The silence between them was thick, oppressive, and when Yn didn't react as expected, Miyoen's smirk deepened, her eyes cold. She leaned in, almost tauntingly. You're in denial, aren't you? Miyoen's voice was icy. You really think Jungkook loves you, that all this is real? But let me tell you something. It's not. You're just a placeholder for the real thing. You were never meant to be with him. Yn's face was still, her gaze hardening. The words were hitting her, yes, but not in the way Miyoen had anticipated. Instead of breaking, Yn suddenly let out a sharp, almost mocking laugh. It was quiet at first, but it grew louder with each passing second, a sound that chilled Miyoen to her core. Miyoen's brows furrowed in confusion, her lips parting as if to say something, but Yn beat her to it. Oh, Miyoen, I can't believe how utterly pathetic you are. Yn's voice cut through the air, dripping with venom. You think you've got it all figured out, huh? You think you've been playing some game and you're winning? Well, guess what? You've lost, and I'm not the one who's going to fall apart here. Miyoen blinked, her confidence starting to unravel. What the hell are you talking about? She spat, her tone faltering for the first time. Yn took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. You don't get it, do you? Jungkook already told me everything. The truth, the whole damn truth, right after he proposed. Her voice was low and calm, like a razor blade slicing through the tension. He told me that you asked him to propose to me. That you manipulated him into doing it. And you know what? He couldn't keep it from me. He never could. Miyoen's face went from smug to pale in an instant. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Yn's cold gaze locked onto hers, and Yn could see the flicker of fear in Miyoen's eyes. She smirked, watching the facade start to crack. As Jungkook turned to leave after his conversation with Miyoen, a lingering unease gnawed at him. He remembered the book Yn had lent Miyoen, still tucked under his arm. Figuring he'd drop it off at her room, he walked back, hoping the uneasiness he felt would fade. But as he neared her dorm, he heard Miyoen's voice, unexpectedly sharp and edged with bitterness. He froze in place, caught off guard by the coldness in her tone. I can't stand Yn anymore, Miyoen spat, her voice dripping with contempt. She acts like she's this sweet, perfect person, but all she does is remind me of everything I'm not. My parents. She laughed bitterly. My parents worship her. Why can't you be more like Yn, Miyoen? Look how responsible she is, how everyone adores her. All my life, I've been in her shadow. It's infuriating. Jungkook's stomach twisted as he stood outside, frozen in shock. The words didn't match the Miyoen he thought he knew. The tone, the spite, they were a world away from the caring friend he had trusted. But she wasn't done. You think I'm going to let Yn just waltz off with the happiness I deserve? She sneered, her voice sharper than he'd ever heard it. No way. So I told Jungkook to propose to her. Imagine her face when she finds out that he only asked her out because I told him to. Her laugh was hollow, a sound so devoid of warmth it made Jungkook's skin crawl. Once she's hooked, once she's completely in love with him, I'll tell her everything. I want to see the look on her face when she realizes she was nothing more than a pawn. Jungkook's chest tightened with disbelief and horror. He gripped the book in his hand, suddenly feeling sick. Miyoen's words clawed at him, each one revealing the depths of her resentment, her jealousy, and her hatred disguised as friendship. And you know the best part? Miyoen continued, practically gloating now. Jungkook will come back to me after all of this. He thinks he loves her now, but he'll remember soon enough. It's me he wants, not her. Yn's just collateral damage. She's always been in my way, and this time, I'm finally getting rid of her. Every word cuts through Jungkook, leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. He felt revulsion swell in him, not just at her cruelty, but at his own blind trust in someone so twisted. This was no friend, no love worth holding onto. This was someone who thrived on cruelty and manipulation, willing to crush anyone who stood in her way. Jungkook stood there, rooted to the spot as Miyoen's words continued to spill, venomous and twisted, each sentence laced with a level of contempt he could barely recognize. He struggled to believe that this was the same Miyoen he had laughed with, confided in, and trusted, someone he once believed to be one ofYn's truest friends. The air around him felt thick and suffocating as he processed the extent of her resentment. It wasn't just jealousy, it was a cold, calculated desire to tear down someone who had always been nothing but kind to her. Yn had shared everything with Miyoen, her laughter, her fears, her dreams, and yet here Miyoen was, using that closeness as a weapon, hoping to destroy everything that Yn held dear. You thinkYn's little halo act fools me? Miyoen scoffed, a sneer twisting her features. Everyone loves her, right? But no one realizes how fake it is. She pretends she's all sweet and caring, but she's so painfully naive. She doesn't even notice how much her perfect life makes everyone else miserable. I'm just done watching her get everything I deserve. So if she thinks Jungkook loves her, well, that's going to make it all the sweeter when she finds out it's all a lie. Jungkook felt a bile rise in his throat. Each word sent waves of disgust through him, making his skin crawl. He wanted to confront her, to demand how she could twist love and friendship into something so ugly. But the shock of it all kept him paralyzed. He never imagined that someone who wore such a gentle mask could harbor so much bitterness beneath it. But then, the true horror of her plan hit him. She didn't just want to win, she wanted Yn to suffer. She wanted to shatterYn's trust, her joy, her sense of self-worth, and she wanted to use him, his love, as the weapon to do it. The realization stung, a sharp betrayal he hadn't seen coming. He had always assumed that Miyoen's request to propose to Yn was out of care, that she genuinely wanted to see Yn happy, not to see her heart broken. A chill went down his spine as her voice dropped, venomous yet steady. Once she's wrapped around his finger, I'll be there to break the news, Miyoen whispered, her voice a mixture of triumph and malice. She'll look at him, at the man she thinks loves her, and realize it was all a setup. And when she's at her lowest, when she's broken, that's when he'll remember who he really belongs with. She'll be left alone, and I'll finally have what should have been mine all along. Jungkook felt his stomach twist, a sickening mix of horror, guilt, and anger swelling in him. The way she spoke about Yn, as though she were some kind of rival to be crushed, left him feeling hollow. Miyoen had wrapped herself in kindness and friendship, all the while harboring a dark resentment, and he had unknowingly played into her hands. Stumbling backward, he clutched the book tightly, his knuckles white from the force. The weight of her betrayal, the cruelty of her intentions, made his pulse pound, his heart aching at the thought of what might have happened if he hadn't heard this. Yn, with her gentle heart, would have been left devastated, her trust shattered by someone she had loved and confided in. This realization left him filled with fierce determination. He couldn't let Miyoen's plan unfold, he couldn't let her destroy Yn's happiness or use his love as a weapon against her. The choice was clear, he had to tell Yn everything. No matter the consequences, he owed her the truth, to protect her from the web of lies and betrayal that Miyoen had spun around her. As he turned to leave, he felt one final wave of revulsion wash over him, knowing he had nearly fallen for Miyoen's scheme. But now, he had a purpose. He would face Yn, not with secrets but with the truth, to ensure that Miyoen's cruel game would end here, and that Yn would finally see the person behind the mask. Jungkook's heart raced as he looked at Yn, trying to find the right words to explain. He had asked her to be his girlfriend, yet he couldn't shake the weight of what he was hiding. The guilt was gnawing at him, growing stronger with every passing second. Seeing his unease, Yn tilted her head, her eyes filled with concern. Jungkook, is something wrong? You look tensed. Without thinking, Jungkook took her hand and, gently but urgently, pulled her into her dorm. Once inside, he took a deep breath, gathering the courage to tell her everything. He could feel his heart pounding, but he knew he couldn't keep the truth from her any longer. Yn, there's something I need to tell you. His voice was barely a whisper, heavy with remorse. Yn's expression shifted, her worry deepening. Jungkook, what is it? He looked down, feeling the shame wash over him. This whole thing, me asking you to be my girlfriend, it wasn't entirely my idea. He hesitated, but then, with a steadying breath, he continued. Miyoen, she told me to do it. Yn's face registered a mix of confusion and hurt. Miyoen told you to ask me out. Why would she do that? Jungkook sighed, the weight of the confession bearing down on him. She said it would make you happy, that you meant the world to her. She made it seem like it was something I had to do, like it was for the best. And at the time, I thought maybe she was right. But I didn't realize. He looked away, the bitterness evident in his voice. I didn't realize her intentions weren't what they seemed. Yn's eyes softened, though confusion still clouded her expression. What do you mean, Jungkook? What was Miyoen really after? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and disgust evident in his face. I overheard her talking, Yn. She wasn't trying to make you happy, she wanted to hurt you. She sees you as a rival, someone she's constantly compared to, and she couldn't stand it anymore. Her plan was to have me ask you out, only so she could break you down later. I was supposed to be a pawn in her scheme. Yn took a step back, her eyes widening with shock. The words seemed to cut deep, each one landing like a blow. She shook her head, trying to process it all. So, Miyoen wanted to hurt me, and you didn't know. Jungkook's eyes brimmed with regret. I had no idea, Yn. I thought I was doing something right, something that would bring you happiness. But now I realize, I was just a part of her plan. And I'm so sorry, I should have known better. I should have trusted my own feelings instead of letting her manipulate me. A silence fell over them, heavy with unspoken pain. After a moment, Yn took a shaky breath, her face a mixture of hurt and understanding. Thank you for telling me the truth, Jungkook, she said softly, though her voice was strained. At least now I know where I stand with her. And with you. Jungkook reached out, his eyes filled with a longing to make things right. Yn, please, I don't want this to be the end. I know I messed up, but I want you to know that my feelings for you are real. And I'll do whatever it takes to prove that. Yn looked down, her mind racing as she processed the truth. The hurt was still raw, but she could sense the sincerity in Jungkook's words. She took a deep breath, nodding slowly, as if making a decision within herself. Yn took her time, allowing herself to process everything. She kept some distance, needing space to heal from the betrayal and confusion. Jungkook respected that, understanding he needed to give her the room to rebuild trust. He remained patient, supporting her from afar, showing her every day that his intentions were sincere and that he genuinely cared for her beyond what anyone else thought or wanted. Over weeks that turned into months, Yn slowly began to feel the bitterness lift, replaced by something warmer, more profound. She saw Jungkook's small acts of kindness, the way he never pressured her but was there whenever she needed him. The laughter they once shared gradually returned, filling the silences with a familiar comfort. They found themselves confiding in each other, sharing their dreams, their fears, their joys. With each conversation, each gentle moment, YN felt her heart begin to soften toward him. She could see the depth of his remorse, his honesty, and the true friendship that had always been the foundation of their connection. Eventually, what was once a fractured bond grew back stronger, shaped by the trust they had carefully rebuilt together. YN came to realize that she did love him, not because of anyone else's wishes but because he had proven himself to her in ways that mattered. One evening, as they sat together under the quiet night sky, YN leaned her head on Jungkook's shoulder, feeling at peace. He looked down at her, his expression hopeful, almost as if he couldn't quite believe this moment was real. With a soft smile, she whispered, "I love you, Jungkook." And this time, it was her choice, her heart fully and freely open to him. "Oh, Miyoen, you really thought you had him fooled, didn't you?" YN's voice grew sharper, more bitter with every word. "You thought you could control the situation, make everyone dance to your tune, but you're just a sad little girl, playing at being in control when you've never had any power over anyone, especially not Jungkook." Miyoen's fists clenched at her sides, but she couldn't seem to speak. Her earlier bravado was evaporating in the face of YN's cutting words. "And you want to know why I stopped spending time with you?" YN continued, her voice ice cold, cutting through the last threads of Miyoen's confidence. "It's because I finally realized what kind of person you are. You've always been a user, a manipulator. You never wanted to be my friend. You were just jealous of everything I had, everything I was. You wanted to tear me down, make me feel small, all so you could feel better about yourself. Well, guess what, Miyoen? I'm not your competition anymore," YN said. The words struck Miyoen like a slap to the face, but YN wasn't done. "You were never my friend," YN went on, each word more venomous than the last. "You were just a snake in the grass, waiting for your chance to sink your fangs into me. And do you know what? It worked. For a while, I believed you cared about me. But now, I see you for what you are, a bitter, selfish little girl who can't stand seeing anyone else happy if it's not on her terms," YN said. Miyoen's expression was a mix of rage and confusion, her eyes wild. She opened her mouth to shout something back, but YN silenced her with a raised hand. "You know, I've wasted too much time on you already," YN said, her tone flat, almost disappointed. "I used to think I owed you my time, my friendship, but now I see that I don't owe you anything. I'm done. You wanted to hurt me. Well, guess what, you already did, but only to yourself." YN took a step back, her eyes not leaving Miyoen for a second. "And you want to talk about Jungkook? You want to say that he's yours? Let me make one thing crystal clear, Jungkook chose me. Not because he had to, not because you told him to. But because he wanted to. And that's something you'll never understand. I'm not a backup, I'm not some second choice. I'm his first choice, and I always will be," YN said because it's true. Miyoen's face twisted in rage, her hands shaking. "You think you've won? You think this is over?" she hissed. YN's lips curled into a cold, hard smile. "No, Miyoen, I don't think I've won. I know I've won, because I've finally learned that my worth doesn't depend on someone else's validation. I don't need anyone to make me feel important, least of all you." With that, YN turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Miyoen standing there, speechless, as the reality of everything she had lost began to sink in. YN didn't look back. There was nothing left to say to someone like her. After the confrontation outside, YN and Jungkook entered the classroom, their footsteps measured and unhurried. The atmosphere inside was thick with tension. But YN didn't flinch. Miyoen sat at her desk, her back straight, her eyes locked on them with an intensity that sent a chill down YN's spine. There was no denying the hatred in her gaze, but YN was done being intimidated. She had already fought her battle, both within herself and against Miyoen, and now she stood on the other side, unshaken. She could feel Jungkook beside her, his presence solid, his quiet confidence and silent support she didn't need to ask for. They were in this together. Miyoen's eyes narrowed, a venomous smile tugging at her lips as she watched them walk in. Her gaze flickered to Jungkook first, and then to YN, her stare calculating and cold. She was waiting for something, waiting for a sign of weakness, of hesitation, but she wouldn't find it here. YN had no more patience for games. Without a word, YN stepped toward Jungkook. She didn't look at Miyoen, didn't even acknowledge the storm brewing behind her. Her focus was entirely on Jungkook now, on the man who had chosen her, on the man who had confessed his love to her, and who had stood by her through everything. That was all that mattered. Jungkook, sensing the shift in the air, didn't hesitate. He didn't look back at Miyoen, didn't give her any more of his attention. He stood tall, his eyes soft, yet full of strength, as YN moved closer. She could feel his warmth as he reached for her hand, and for a moment, the world outside of them seemed to fade. Then, without a second thought, YN kissed him. It wasn't a simple, fleeting kiss. It was fierce and full of purpose. Her lips pressed firmly against his, and it was as if all the years of confusion, pain, and resentment were poured into that moment. The kiss was bold, unapologetic. A declaration. To Miyoen, to the world, to herself. Jungkook was hers, and she wasn't going to hide it any longer. Jungkook didn't pull away. He kissed her back with just as much intensity, his hands sliding to her waist, pulling her closer. He met her with a passion that said everything YN needed to hear. He had no regrets. He had no second thoughts. He had chosen her, and nothing could change that. YN pulled back slightly, breathless but not done. She moved her lips to his neck, pressing a soft, but deliberate kiss there, marking him in front of Miyoen, in front of everyone. Her lips lingered for a moment, and when she pulled away, she could see Miyoen's face crumple in disbelief. The anger in her eyes was clear, but so was the sting of defeat. Jungkook met YN's gaze, his eyes sparkling with a mix of amusement and affection, and YN could see the pride in his expression. He didn't just let her mark him, he welcomed it. He was proud to be hers. Is there anything else you want to say, Miyoen? YN asked, her voice cutting through the silence. Her tone was harsh, dripping with mockery. Because, honestly, I'm getting tired of listening to you. Miyoen's jaw clenched as she opened her mouth, but no words came out. The venomous, malicious words she had prepared fell flat. She couldn't say anything. There was nothing she could say that would undo what had just happened. YN's smirk grew colder, a final touch of triumph as she turned to face Miyoen one last time. You thought you could control everything, didn't you? YN's voice was like a blade, sharp and deliberate. You thought you could manipulate Jungkook, play him like a puppet, but here we are. And it's me he's with. Not you. He's mine, Miyoen. He always has been. YN said. The words hit Miyoen like a slap, each one ringing in her ears as the reality of her loss settled in. Miyoen had been so sure, so confident that she could break them, tear them apart. But YN had shown her, in front of her eyes, that all of Miyoen's scheming had been for nothing. Miyoen's face turned pale, the tears she had been holding back now spilled down her cheeks. Her hands clenched into fists, but she couldn't stop the tremor in her body. She couldn't stop the tears, and she couldn't stop the crushing wave of defeat that crashed over her. YN looked at her, no pity in her gaze, only contempt. I'm not the naive girl you thought I was, Miyoen. You tried to tear us apart, but in the end, it's you who's left with nothing. With that final declaration, YN turned away, her hand still entwined with Jungkook's. As they walked toward the door, YN couldn't resist one last glance over her shoulder. I heard someone saying that Jungkook is mine and always will be mine, she said, her voice firm and filled with finality. Her words echoed in the room, and Miyoen's face twisted in disbelief, her eyes wide, her heart breaking as the realization fully sank in. Miyoen had lost. Jungkook wasn't hers. Not anymore. He never had been, not in the way she had wanted. He had always been YN's. Always. The room was silent except for the soft sound of YN's footsteps as she walked out, pulling Jungkook along with her. As the door clicked shut, Miyoen sat there in stunned silence, her body shaking with the weight of the truth. She had been defeated. Outside, YN and Jungkook walked down the hall, side by side. No words were needed between them. They both knew that this was the moment where everything had changed. Miyoen had no power over them anymore. The love they shared was real, undeniable, unwavering, and it would never be swayed by anyone else. They didn't need to look back. They had already won.